I have been seeing these two dresses on Pinterest for a very long time, and it's always been on my list of things to eventually create, but with the premiere of Bridgerton Season 4 this year, I have been extra inspired to take the plunge and finally sew this for myself because I can't afford these prices in this economy. Honestly, in any economy. The original designers I'm inspired by the way, is this $350 version from Crossnova. And then there is this version from the Brock collection, like the 2020 spring collection. I could not for the life of me find the price for this. It said anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. So I found a similarly priced dress that was in the same collection, and that was $3,000. We're gonna split the difference between $1,000 and $3,000. We're gonna call this $2,000, but who knows? This is somewhere in the thousands of dollars. This is not to take away from the work and talent that went into these pieces and how probably well made they are, because they probably are well made. But I cannot afford either of these prices. And plus, there's a couple of changes I would like to make. I also want to show how easy it is to make clothing out of bed sheets. I've done that several times on this channel, but with the fact that we have enough clothing to clothe 6 generations of people, but I do love to sew. So thrifting my fabric is a much more sustainable way to keep creating the clothes that I want to wear. I'm on super speed to make as many of my Pinterest inspired pieces as possible because there have been whisperings that OpenAI is interested in buying Pinterest, and I am an AI hater. My sneaking suspicion is that OpenAI does not wish to grow Pinterest as this artistic and creative hub. Instead, they wish to steal all the very hard work and beautiful work of these original content creators and put them into their slopification simulator and then just let Pinterest rot and die in the corner. If anyone has an alternative to Pinterest, please let me know. I would love to start trying them out. I've already tried one. I didn't love it, but if you have any more, please put them in the comments. But with that mountain of hope, let's get started. So I found this thrifted vintage bed sheet that was the perfect toile pattern, but there's just 2 problems. 1, for a dress or a gown, I like to at least thrift a queen size flat sheet, and this is a twin. And 2, it was $30, and I try to keep my thrifted bed sheets under $25 just for my own sanity, but it was just too beautiful, so I ended up taking the plunge. So I was hoping I would have enough fabric for my plan. And why use a brand new pattern when I have one that I can use as a base? We are starting with this McCall's pattern that is a great starting point and contains most of the basics I need for this pattern. We'll just need to tweak the fit and find a basic sleeve pattern piece. So since this has that Regency Empire waist, I needed to shorten each of the bodice pieces by a couple of inches, which was good because I need to save as much fabric as possible. I will also not be able to pattern match, which I tend not to care about anyway, but with so little fabric, it's basically impossible to even try. I also widened the sleeve by a couple of inches. I would have done more if I'd had the fabric, and also lengthened the sleeve because it's a bit short as is, and I do need extra length for that blousey effect that we're going to add with shirring later. I knew I needed to leave as much length as possible for the skirt section, but I needed another sleeve to cut out, so I pre-cut this square so I could separate the 2 swaths of fabric and use one for the other sleeve and the other piece for the lining pieces. Once again, because of the big skirt panel I needed, I ended up having to turn the 2 back lining pieces sideways to save room. And the skirt panel is the easiest. I just made sure that the top was straight across, and the finished seams on the side become the front opening of the gown, and that big bottom seam becomes my hem. This was, of course, not going to have that long train like the originals, but I didn't want that anyway. I want this to be somewhat more everyday and wearable, so this shorter length ended up working out just fine. I was also able to use the top hem, which became my tie. This part could also be used for the little ruffles on the original design of the sleeves, but I decided those details tend to drive me crazy when I have to iron or steam them, so I left that out of the design. With everything cut out, we can finally get to sewing, making sure to clip the seams and match the markings for a proper fit. Once the outer shell was done, a couple of days later, I was able to also sew the bodice lining. Right here I'm pinning the outer and lining layers together so I can make changes to them simultaneously. I tried on the bodice to make some style and fit changes, like outlining the more open neckline and taking in the arm size to fit my shoulders. I should have actually made these markings on my lining layer, because even though this marker is removable, it gets annoying to make sure that you've 100% dissolved it. But with the two layers pinned together, I was able to make sure the cuts were exactly the same on both pieces. I then sewed my ties, which I only wanted them on my bodice. In the originals, they do a bunch of them, like most of the way down the front, but I thought that would be kind of annoying to deal with, even though it is quite pretty. So I only needed to make 6, which was good for me because I kind of hate sewing ties. If I have to make more than 2, I start to get bored. Maybe I wasn't being honest with myself and I took away all those ties because I hate sewing them. Then it was time to sew the sleeves. After putting it together into a tube, I made a small hem for each sleeve since I need all the length I can get. Then I made 2 rows of basting stitches to gather the top of the sleeve. You're supposed to do 3, but I am usually too lazy for that. And for a sleeve, 2 rows work just fine. After attaching it to the arm's eyes, I then got started on marking for the shirring. I knew I wanted the end of the wrist section to be 6 inches above the hem of the sleeve, so I started there, marked a 2.5-inch block, and set that next block 6 inches above that one for the upper arm section. The Brock Collection dress only had like an elasticated section for the sleeves, but I liked the shirring section on the Cross Nova version, and I will take any excuse to do shirring. It might just be my favorite sewing technique. So if you've never tried shirring before, here's a basic tutorial. First, you have to fill the bobbin by hand with elastic thread, making sure not to stretch it as you go along, then thread the machine normally. I usually just mark my blocks of fabric that I want to add shirring to, but if you want to, you can mark every line of shirring individually if you wish to. After backstitching for a few stitches, I sew along my top line. Then about an inch before I need to start my next row of shirring, I slowly sew my needle down to where it becomes the next line of stitching without stopping or cutting my threads. The more times you have to lift and move your needle, the more knots you have to make with that elastic at the end. So I tend to just make it one long line so I have as few knots to make as possible. And then I made each line about a half an inch away from each other. A couple of tips here: the more lines you add, the smaller the elasticated section will become. So if you need the fabric to fit a very small area, consider adding more rows, and make sure to keep your fabric unwrinkled as it goes through the needle. This isn't very difficult, but it is something you have to keep constant tension on the fabric for. You don't want to permanently make your fabric smaller, you just want it to be elasticated. Once that was done, I pinned and sewed the outer layer and lining at the neckline. In order to make the lining layer lay correctly and not slip towards the outside, I do an extra line of top stitching about 1/8 of an inch away from the original seam on the lining side, pinning my seam allowance to that lining side. This ensures the lining layer will stay inside the garment and the outer layer looks a bit better this way. Here's another lazy hack I do for my skirt. I start with a 1/4 inch elastic and cut it to fit my waist. I honestly should have fitted to the bottom edge of the bodice, but oh well, this still works. Then along the top edge of the skirt, I pull the elastic taut as I sew a zigzag stitch over it. Then I pin all of this to the outer shell layer of the bodice and stitch that down. Since I wanted this to look extra nice, I'm going to hand stitch the lining layer. I try to hand stitch as little as possible. I am very slow at it, as you may be able to tell, but since I might wear this open sometimes, I want to ensure that everything looks as nice and finished as I can. And with that, it's time to show you guys the final result. Over the past year or so, I have turned my focus to making pieces that I feel like are much more everyday, a little bit more wearable, than the more fantastical pieces that I had made the year before. And this one is somewhere in the middle, and I really like that. It's not the most wearable piece that I have in my closet. This is definitely more of one I feel like artsy and extra special and want to go out. I love pieces that you can pair with literally just a tank top and jeans, and it becomes the coolest and most unique and whimsical outfit. It does something to my brain when that one piece completely alters an outfit and makes it super special. And that's what this piece is. And as a lifelong Jane Austen fan, this is filling a part of my brain that I really like. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me this week. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe, and also liking and commenting really help me out. I hope you had a good time, and I hope to see you back here next time. Bye.